to the Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
Glad you're here. Don't look twice.
Well, let me just say this. If you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, nothing will seem different at all.
Nothing.
Well, okay.
Our voices may sound on the wrong side.
Yeah. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't pan our voices back the way they're supposed to be, so hopefully this doesn't trip you up if you're watching. This is our... I'm not going to get into it yet, so I don't hit the theme song yet. But this is that segment that we do that I won't name, where we go deeper on the sermon from Sunday.
Yep.
And for the first time on a Sunday, I actually preach. So I'm sitting in the preachy chair.
Which I mean, I did say on Sunday this is the first time you preached. It is the first time you've preached at Kingsway from the stage, but you've taught other times.
Yeah, I've taught before. I taught a whole atonement class here.
You're a very good teacher. I just knew the intensity of being on the stage in non-singing capacity.
Yeah,
is a little bit different.
To be fair, I did still sing for like 4 seconds. Were you in there for that?
Nope.
No. So I not gonna spoil anything, but kind of centered around verse 43. You've heard love your neighbor but hate your enemy, but I say love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. And I was making that kind of the center of the whole thing. And so I kept mentioning love, and I was like, okay, I've mentioned love like 100 times.
What's love got to do with it?
I even did the like background dancer where you like sidestep and you like do this.
I read that in your manuscript. So
yeah. I'm not proud of it, but it did happen.
It did happen. Dude, you got to have one at least embarrassing moment. Well,
oh yeah.
I hope you're excited to see what was left out, what was missing, and what we needed to talk about. So we're going to get into that right now. I'm excited to be on this side and to question you and to listen to some of your thoughts as we start this Sunday study hall. If you're unaware of what we do, just in a quick assessment, Ryan's going to basically have an attempt or have a try or have an opportunity to add to, correct, change, or maybe even go further on some of the things that he preached on. But if you didn't hear his sermon or you weren't aware of what he preached on Sunday, you can go and watch that on our YouTube channel. But he's going to give us a 90-second rundown on what he preact on. And
I just want to catch you up.
Just catch you up. And I will tell you, from the pain, the opportunity, the great thing that it is to do this in 90 seconds when you've done it. How long did you preach yesterday? 40,
I think 45 minutes.
45 minutes.
Now, there was like a 7 to 9 minute story at the end. So that makes it better.
I'm just saying 90 seconds, dude.
Oh, I got it. I don't know what you keep complaining about.
90
it's so
seconds.
Easy.
Tell me what you did yesterday in the sermon. Go.
I'm just going to hit the start right here.
Okay.
Start. Yeah. Okay.
Go.
So, yesterday we talked about kind of the end of chapter 5 of the Sermon on the Mount, which covers 5, 6, 7, those chapters in the Gospel of Matthew. And I feel like what Jesus is trying to say there is wrapping up most of chapter 5. He didn't write it in chapters, well, at least not the chapters we have. But he's wrapping up this whole first part where he's juxtaposing blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor in spirit, and you have to be super righteous. And he comes to the point where he says what that line is. And he says that with your love, with your power, you should let your love grow up and let it be godly love. And godly love gives itself away. So you can know that you're immature like the tax collectors and the other people if your love is selfish and only rewards those who reward you, but you can know your love is like God's love and you're looking like God and you're being an Eden-made kind of person if your love is grown up and gives itself away. So don't just give it away to your friends like these immature tax collectors. Give it away to your enemies, including when they slap you in the face and when they take your coat in court. That's hard to say. And when they do all these other terrible things. By that, you'll know that you're like your Father in heaven.
Very good. 10 seconds to spare.
Yeah.
Any shout outs?
Easy. Shout out, Mom, for me not telling you that I was preaching on Sunday.
No. Oh, my
yeah.
God.
I'd like to thank the Academy. Okay. Yeah, you can get that out of here.
All right, that was much less stressful on
Yeah.
this side of the table.
I feel like most of what I preached was the summary of the passage. I didn't preach that much like historical background detail. I did enough to make it make sense, but it wasn't like super lost in shoulder high weeds.
I think that's the hardest thing about preaching is it's not, like you said last night when you were explaining to someone, it's not explaining or giving an hour's worth of understanding.
Yeah, it's not an hour's worth of information.
It's not an hour's worth of information. It's legitimately has to have a point. Like it is a religious TED Talk, maybe in our context. Like you're trying to,
I was hoping it didn't feel like a
so
TED
well,
Talk,
no,
but yeah.
and you know what I mean. But like in the end, there's action, there's opportunity for involvement, there's a chance to find yourself in what you're learning.
Yeah,
and that takes
Jesus here is so pointed.
Yep,
he's not like, did you know? Fun fact that sausage is made by whatever. Just kidding. That's it'd have to be like beef sausage or something.
Okay, so one of my favorite questions to ask you as we start, because I do agree this is a really pointed, like very like there's no way around like what Jesus is trying to teach. Like you can't skirt this. Much like what we taught the week before. Like you can't skirt it. You can't skirt it. So what was your favorite thing to talk? Like what was your favorite part of the sermon or the text that you just like kept finding yourself getting hung up on? You're like, I just got to make sure I say this, or this is the thing that kept, and maybe even put it in the context of why. Like was it way it connected to your life or the way you saw it connecting to others? Like what was that thing that you kept?
Yeah. I'd say the whole last 5 verses and kind of the last thing I mentioned, how he brackets that big chunk of thought, kind of 43 through 48, where he says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. By this you'll be known as children of your Father in heaven. Don't just give away, or don't just reward people who reward you. Don't just be like don't tax collectors do that. Don't sinners do that.
Yeah.
But instead, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. I think the perfect part was one of my favorites, but it's how it all played together.
Yeah.
To where love is the topic the entire time. You're showing that you're giving your allegiance to, and you're like a good rabbi and his students, a good teacher and his students. You're starting to look like the teacher. If you love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, you're starting to look like God himself.
Yeah.
You're not looking like how you used to look, like immature, like tax collectors, sinners. And then the call is be mature.
Yeah.
Even though it says be perfect, but that's a translation of another language, and perfect doesn't necessarily mean be without flaw. It just means be grown up.
Yeah.
Be complete.
I think that's really healthy because
where you're gonna
when
get
you
to.
read that, I think everybody's just kind of like, well, can't even try because I'm going to fail. And I, for me, the thing that you kept leaning into when we were talking about this and you were prepping and we had multiple discussions this last week, you put in so much time and effort. And I think it came out on Sunday, but I think it also is just a sign of your desire to get it right and to do your best. And that's honestly very undervalued at times. But I loved when you kept talking about Martin Luther King Jr.'s double victory.
I could not stop.
That was what to me stood out when we were talking. That was the thing that I could just tell your heart's like, this is why this matters.
Okay, can I get into a 10-minute rabbit trail, or do you want to be a little more pointed?
I mean, you decide. I'm just the interviewer.
Okay. The way that this passage plays into Christian ethics is huge, and it's led to throughout history. But Martin Luther King and this other guy I'm going to mention are both from like the 1900s, mid 1900s to late 1900s.
Okay.
And it led to both of them leaning into a thing called nonviolent resistance.
Yep.
As just a decision you make beforehand about how you're going to interact with evil. So it's not vicious violence, of course. It's also not pacifism. Pacifism's generally seen as passivity. We don't answer evil.
Yeah.
Evil is
so
a
it's
big
not
old
ignoring
man
or
with
pretending.
boots, and we are bugs, and we get stepped on. This nonviolent resistance is not that we don't answer evil, but it's that we do answer evil, and we answer it not with the weapons that evil uses. So there's two sides to this.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it in Martin Luther King Jr., at least in that part of the speech I mentioned. And I honestly, I want to back up from that. But is it in my notes? Because I really hope it is.
It is.
Here we go. Here we go.
The quote's
okay.
in the notes.
Here's the quote that we read. It's from a speech from 1966, Civil Rights Movement. Be assured that we will wear down our opposition by our capacity to suffer. Now, right before that, that's his summary. That's his be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. What he says before that is, he actually goes through the 4 Greek words for love in his speech at Illinois Wesleyan University. And then he says, this is my message to our opposition in the Civil Rights Movement. We will love you no matter what. We will continue to love you no matter how vicious and vile you are to us. And so he says, you can bomb us and threaten our children, and we will still love you. You can drag us out from our homes in the middle of the night, drag us onto the town square, and beat us half to death, and we will still love you. Be assured that we will wear down our opposition by our capacity to suffer. And so he's not saying we won't answer it. He's saying we will actively love you in spite of you doing all this stuff to us. And then he gets to this next part. And one day we will win our freedom, but we will not only win freedom for ourselves, we will so appeal to your heart and your conscience that we will win you in the process. And our victory will be a double victory.
It reminds me so much. And when I heard you talk about this the first time, what struck me was how countercultural it is, like how it feels completely wrong. But then the more you think about it, and I honestly, anybody that's listening to this, I ask you to think about this truthfully. Think about it like schoolyard bullies.
Yeah.
Think of it like a childhood thing. Don't think about it the worst things, because when I read Acts chapter 3 or chapter 2, and you read what Peter says, you killed the Son of God. You did it. And you see what the people respond with. They are cut to the heart.
Yeah.
And
we appeal to your heart.
We appeal to that
conscience.
heart. And how did Jesus get in there? Through his ability to suffer. Philippians 2. That's what he did.
Yeah.
He suffered so much that when it was revealed who he really was and how much he truly loved, and the people, they were cut to the heart.
Yeah.
It's a double victory.
Yeah.
Is what it is. I mean, it's double victory. It's wild.
So there's that side of nonviolent resistance. We're going to answer evil with love. There's another side of it that maybe Martin Luther King also held to, but I don't really know. But another guy I read named Walter Wink has really leaned into in a lot of his writings. He has a trio of books, Unmasking the Powers, Answering the Powers, and Something the Powers. But he kind of summarizes some of it in this little 50-page book called Jesus and Nonviolence. And he goes through the beginning of the passage I preached on, when somebody slaps you in the face, turn the other cheek also. When somebody sues you for your shirt, give them your coat, go the extra mile. And he says, he doesn't lean into you're loving your enemy by doing these things. What he says is you're shaming your enemy by doing these things. And there are some Bible passages to back up. There we go. To back up an attitude like this. Like, I don't remember where it is, but
pour heaping coals.
Yeah. Your good works, when they try to shame you, will pour heaping coals on their head.
I'm pretty sure it's 1 Thessalonians, but I don't know.
1 Corinthians 1. God will use the weak to shame the strong.
Yep.
So there is this speak to power kind of thing in the New Testament for sure, and probably in parts of the Old Testament that I'm forgetting right now. There is that, and there is shame to power. You read it in Revelation a ton too, where power looks powerful, and then God sneezes, and they're like, "Oh, save me!" And
well, and like I can say from my experience with my kids, like say I get really angry in traffic or something's, you know what I mean, and then my kid comes up with like a soft, like, "Hey, Dad, are you okay?" And like,
you're like,
it
ooh,
shames me. Like
I did that wrong.
Exactly.
And
like,
you can probably hold both of these, one in each hand: the love for your enemy and the shame to attack the misuse of power in your enemy.
Yep.
But the way he leans into it is that these things will shame them. So for the backhand slap, which I talked about yesterday as both about pain and about shame, and in their honor shame culture is really heavy.
Oh, yeah.
It's honestly more about shame than anything. If you wanted to hurt somebody, you would open hand. But if you wanted to shame them, you would backhand. And so responding to backhand shame with the other cheek, okay, either they accept that offer and they look cruel to everybody around them So you could be taken to court for backhanding somebody, like prosecuted, not just like assault in our day and age, but like full on, you hurt this person's reputation.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Well, and their culture has shame tactic called Jesus, shake your sandals, shake the dust off your sandals and leave that place. That is, this place has rejected you at the utmost level, and so you are leaving that place in its choice, right?
Yeah.
They also had like I think there's a divorce way that you take a shoe off and you would like throw a shoe at the person, and it was like this, like, you're no longer with me, like we're no longer together, we're no longer connected, we're no longer walking the same way, like type thing. Even the prodigal son, when he puts the robe back on him, puts the ring back on him, puts the shoes back on him, kills the fattened calf, those are all like taking away shame. And restoring him back to where he was. So, like, I think you're absolutely
shame
right.
was huge for them.
It is.
And that's why I said this in my sermon too. That's why crucifixion was so powerful. It was torture, it was murder, it was killing. And on top of that, you were mostly naked up there. All of our like Passion of the Christ crucifixion images that we have today are Jesus in like towel underwear. Sort of stuff.
But most like, well, and Ravi Zacharias, rest his soul, Grace cover. He used to talk about the cross's two forms. The Western world saw the torture, and the Eastern world saw him drug outside the city and put next to sinners.
Yeah.
So the shame of that was like removing him from his family, removing him from everything that would have made his family look good. And then his mom watches him die on the same mountain as felons. And like just the shame of that alone was the thing the Eastern world most attached to. They didn't care about the pain. They're like, we don't want the shame. Where it's like you're saying, it's both. It's both. It's absolutely both. But the Western world, we're more individual, right?
Yeah.
We just care about ourselves. We don't care about other people. It's natural. So this passage is even more difficult, which leads to my next question, Ryan. I'm sorry to transfer so quick, but like, what was the hardest, or what was the trickiest, or what was the part that you were least excited? I know it's weird to talk about the Bible in this way, but like, what was the part that you were like, I don't really want to talk about, or I'm having a hard time figuring this one out? Or was there? Or you just know it all?
I don't know that there's a hard verse or a hard phrase in here. For me, the hardest part was, like we said earlier, preaching is not, here's 45 minutes of information. That was the hardest part for me, because that's what I love. That's what I dig into. That's what I like absorb and obsess over.
Yeah.
And taking the information I had and then being like, now let me make this a good presentation for anybody.
Yep.
Let me make this, and think about like, how can this be a blessing and minister to people, even when they have to walk out for 5 minutes in the middle because their kid's screaming and they come back. How can I make them not lost? How can I repeat and refrain stuff enough that like, and that's great. And I think it was good for me to do that. That is the part of this that wasn't muscle memory.
Oh,
that
yeah,
I was
man.
like, it wasn't enjoyable for me to write that out. It's still great to give it, but it was just like all the to think about like, how can I tie in an article from the New York Times to the intro of this thing? I'm like, okay,
what's funny is like I feel like the very thing that I'm really good at is the thing that you're not so good at.
Yeah.
And the very good thing you're great at is the thing that I'm like, I don't know. Like I can't figure it out. And so like watching you teach and like the amount of detail and the amount of information that you collected for like 10 verses was like 10 times what I would have done. And then the amount of like, I could tell you had to like go like into the depths of your soul and motivate yourself to try to figure out how to make this just not a list of ingredients for what you could create, but actually turn it into a recipe where you're like, no, I have garlic, I have salt, I have pepper, I have chicken. And here's all that in. No, dude, have fun with it, people. Like, here you know.
You also know if you make a breakfast casserole for 20 people, maybe you need to make 2. The more people you have, the more likely you're like, I'm not going to put peppers and onions in this. People are going to pick it out. They're going to whatever. And you just bring it down to like what the thing needs and not the breakfast thing you would have made for yourself.
Yep.
Which, to be fair, the breakfast thing I would make for myself wouldn't have peppers and onions either. I'm that person.
See, and that's where,
That's what it felt like. It felt like if all the information I could have said was my whole body, like I had to saw off all of my limbs and then roll out just my torso and my head and be like, here you go. And well, I just love the detail side so much.
I rewatched.
It's still great.
I rewatched most of your sermon last night, and I was just very impressed with several things, but one of the things that I was really impressed with was how much you were still yourself. Like,
Yeah.
like it didn't feel like you were a robot. It didn't feel like you were reading it. Like you had moments where you had your little sarcastic comments that you would throw in there. Like, I don't know if I just lost face with everybody or I gained it all back. And like, it felt very natural and it felt like you. If you could go back and I know this is really hard because most of the time, by the time you give birth to a sermon, you're like, it's my baby. I don't want to change anything. But like, if you could go back and like rewrite a section or take something out or change something, is there anything that you were like, this section, I would do it a little different or I would change this up?
I don't know.
It's your baby. So I mean, I get it.
If I could have had another 15 minutes to like another 15 minutes to present, I cut out like I wrote it manuscript style, word for word, but I had practiced it enough that I just glanced at it and looked back up, and it wasn't super red. I hope.
No, you
but
did great.
I had a whole like page and a half of marriage stuff, not so that I could make this a marriage sermon, but so that I could talk about commitment, because marriage is like, we've gotten rid of so many commitments in our world today. I feel like different generations listening to this podcast would vibe with this. I just said vibe, so I just cut out
all the old
30 and above.
Okay.
But
trying to vibe.
The World War II era of people.
Yeah, boomers.
Boomers, they were raised by parents who lived in an age of duty.
Yep.
We have a duty to our country and to our city, to our state, to our world. We have a duty to our family. We have a duty to this or that or whatever. And so boomers were raised in those families and they have those values.
Yeah.
So a question they might ask is like, what are you doing for our society? But by the time it gets down to my generation and under, we don't have an age of duty that we're living into. We have an age of authenticity and an age of whatever. And so navigating those two things and talking about some duty-centered things. Duty. I knew it was going to happen.
Sorry.
It feels like we've gotten rid of so many of the commitment things that the age of duty would have held on to. So sorry.
They would have held on to that duty. I got it.
They would have held on to that duty. I'm so sorry. But like the call, the commitment, the like, you're a man and that means that you need to be responsible for this and that and this. Like the fact that we've gone from that generation to so many people having a dog or a cat as their kid. Mm-hmm. It's a pet, but they treat it like their kid because they still feel the innate responsibility that they want to take care of something sometimes. Some people don't, but like we've gotten rid of the pressure to feel that way. Yeah. And so now one of the only remaining things is marriage. And quiet quitting was that responsibility conversation. Mm-hmm. We don't feel responsible to our job. We're not a part of making it better. They pay us money to do tasks and we'll only do those tasks and then leave.
To the level that they've asked and no further.
Unless we authentically think that job will change the world and help people.
Yeah, and
that's why pastoral ministry for me is really great, because in the age of authenticity, I think I'm doing stuff that makes a difference. I don't think I have a duty to serve. I mean, I do, but I'm not culturally led to think I have a duty to serve my church. I'm culturally led to think I authentically want to help the world. Yeah. And I think that serving in my local church is the way I do that. And that's why I don't spend 40 hours a week at the church. I spend 30 hours a week at the church, but then I'm super okay running sound for a camp 25 minutes away in the evenings on a certain week, because that's helping the Big C church, the worldwide church, even if it's not helping Kingsway.
Yep.
So like, that's the difference. So we've lost so much responsibility that we're pressured into having, that now marriage is the only commitment we really feel, that we really hold on to, which again, quick, easy divorce in the Reagan administration didn't help that. But yeah, so like it's the last agape love sort of thing we should have. It's been tainted by a lot of marriages, not necessarily most, but like I'm sure we could all list a good handful of examples of people who don't live up to that commitment.
And we talked about this before, like Timothy Keller, God rest his soul, who just passed away. in the Gospel Coalition that he started, one of the things that he had is a very popular reel going around on TikTok and Instagram, and I think he even made it to Facebook, which means it's probably been out for several years. But
You might be right.
Yeah, he basically says that all marriage is a promise.
Yeah.
And you actually are married to and will be married and a part of a marriage that is very different from when you start to when you end.
Yeah.
You probably wrote the best marriage book of all time. I think I even said it on here before, but The Meaning of Marriage is probably one of the best marriage books of all time. It's incredibly dense and thick, but it's so incredibly good. But he says the promise is, I promise to be with you today, and I promise I'm making a promise that I have an appointment with you tomorrow, and I have a promise that I'm going to make an appointment with you next year, and every year. And it's a promise, so it's not my feelings, it's not my desires, it's not if it's convenient or if it's easy. It's a promise. And why that is so hard is because we live in a culture where we don't want to commit to anything unless it's the best thing. And so when something better comes along, we just change our promise. We go back on our commitment to get this new thing. And what ends up being lost in that is that the discipline of commitment has its own harvest, has its own reward. But if you've never seen it and you've never gone long enough to experience it, you don't know it. You miss out. Like it's not something you can.
So to come back around full circle, what I wish I could have done more or written better or whatever is I wish I could have had some stuff about marriage in there. But every time I cut down my sermon, it got longer in time. And I don't know how that works, but I shouldn't have kept it in. I think it would have got longer in time anyway. But I want to keep that in
more time
because it's one of the few commitments that we still technically have, although it's shaken by a bunch of things in our culture.
Yeah.
And I had another thing I was going to say about that, and I don't remember. Other than if you're confused about any of this, love is a verb. DC Tog.
Dude, 100%.
That's
Jesus,
what we're talking about.
Jesus is the best marriage counselor of all time. Do you love her? That's his only marriage counseling.
Yeah.
I don't know. No. Do you love her? And like verb, not feeling.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only thing he's going to say. Like, have you been loving her? Do you love her? And like, he's like, here's the fun thing about where I think this sermon was and how I feel like it was just an incredible first sermon for you. I think it hit you right in the hearts of like what you feel, what you're committed to, what you're learning about. I say it all the time, and I think you did a good job of it this week, is you preached to yourself first, and then you let everybody else watch.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's what you were doing. You had a conversation with yourself all week long, and then you just let others in. You gave them privied information of, this is what I've been wrestling with. This is what I characterize my life as I think this is a double victory in the way that we live and move. I'm still trying to figure this out. I don't have it all figured out, but I'm hoping. And the nice thing is, in the Sermon on the Mount, you can never not see Jesus in what you're teaching.
Yeah.
You can never not see him in it. Like anything that you read in there, Jesus is just like the mirror of like what's being said.
There's so many like prophetic apocalyptic times that that people in different books describe somebody. So they describe Jesus showing up in Revelation chapter 1. He's got a sword coming out of his mouth, and his feet are like bronze, and his eyes are on fire. That's how they try to describe somebody visually, but they're saying characteristics. So when Jesus is describing all these characteristics just bluntly, like he is still painting a picture of somebody.
Absolutely.
And that somebody is him, but it's also who he's hoping you'll be through him.
He's not being lustful. He's not angry in the way that we see anger.
Yeah.
He's not coming in. He's not left us. He's faithful. He's telling the truth, and he's going to love us even though we fight against him. Like he's going to love the world even though we asked for a shirt, and he's going to give us the sun. Like, I mean, it's like it's crazy. So
there's one historical background thing I want to hit, and we've hit it on the podcast before, but it ties in a really cool way. I read this 10 minutes ago, so that's not true. We've been here 30 minutes. I read this 50 minutes ago.
We read this 10 minutes before the podcast started.
Yes. I typed into ChatGPT to like get some questions, but then we didn't end up using them. But one of them was, what are examples of ways people used violence at that time that Jesus is trying to answer?
Yeah.
By saying, Don't hate your enemy, love your enemy, and pray for those who persecute you. So we've talked about this before. The enemy is the Romans for them. That's real easy, real cut and dry. Sometimes it's your neighbor, sometimes it's whatever. Especially if they like get in bed with the Romans, metaphorically.
Tax collectors.
Tax collectors and like rats. Anyway,
Traitors.
traitors. Yeah, that kind of thing. But the major ways that people responded to the Romans were the zealots, like Simon the Zealot, one of Jesus' disciples. He was a zealot before he was a disciple. I assumed he didn't stab anybody while he was. But the zealots are kind of like guerrilla warfare assassin kind of guys.
100%.
Think in the Vietnam War, we Americans went over and we fought two groups. We fought the Viet Cong, kind of like the underground militia.
Yeah, like the rebellion, like the rebel
guerrilla
army.
warfare. They're the people with the spike traps and the people digging through holes and whatever. And then the Vietnamese Republican Army, the V something A. Anyway, they were the organized force. So the zealots in this day are the bamboo spike trap kind of fighters,
shrouded in mystery and shadow, but still very present.
They think that God loves us. God wants us to be free. We've sinned enough that he isn't or whatever. But he hates the Romans for sure. So as much as we can do to kill them and make them upset and frustrate their plans and whatever, we're going to do that. That's one answer to the enemy.
Yeah.
And then the Pharisees and the Sadducees had similar but different takes on it. The Pharisees generally didn't get along with the Romans and didn't play into their stuff. They thought we just need to get back ritual purity, and then God will react to that by kicking the Romans out. The Sadducees thought, and by the way, Pharisees and Sadducees, both religious leaders, both like church pastors, government, church government,
just which
people.
rules and which books they followed. Determined, which one you were.
The Sadducees thought the Romans are here, but it doesn't really hurt our ability to worship God, so we're just going to keep doing that and hope that they don't decide to kill us someday. They're both religious leaders, but one kind of liked the Romans and one kind of didn't and went on with it. And then there's the Essenes in the Qumran community. They were like, the Romans are here. And all these people are doing all these things around whatever. And it's probably because they're bad and we're good. So then they went off to a hillside somewhere else and made their own little perfect culty community. I say culty not because I think they were a cult, but because when I think about cults, I think about we built our compound out here in the desert and that
totally
kind of
off
thing.
the grid.
Yeah, off the grid is more what I'm aiming at. Okay, so these are the responses to anger. And there are a bunch of citizens who aren't necessarily Pharisees or zealots, but they're kind of rooting for one or the other or give more credit to one or the other. So when all that said, when Jesus gets to verse 43, you have heard it said that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Love your neighbor is a command in the Old Testament.
It is.
It's from Leviticus something. You can look it up
John
yourself.
Coward's not here to tell us.
Yeah, that's true. But Jesus in the greatest commandment says, somebody asked him, what's the greatest commandment? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. One of either the Old Testament or the New Testament doesn't have one of those words.
Yeah.
But one has three and one has
It's
four.
basically the Shema.
It's the Shema. Deuteronomy 6. They would have all loved that and known that and been like, great answer, Jesus. And then he says, and the second one is like it, and quotes something from the middle of Leviticus about loving your neighbor. And they're like, okay. So love your neighbor. They all know Leviticus. But then love your neighbor and hate your enemy is not in the Old Testament. Now, this is why I was reading this earlier. I have a book, Our Father Abraham, Jewish Roots of the Christian Faith by Marvin R. Wilson.
Ryan is a bookie.
I'm a bookie.
If you can't see this
I
because you're
love
not
taking
watching,
bets on horse races.
There are stacks of books everywhere in his office.
So I'm going to read from page 119. Nobody need to know that, but I'm just going to say it. The Qumran writings, or Dead Sea Scrolls, that's where we get a lot of our best Old Testament manuscripts. It's from a random cave. From the Essenes. Yes, this is them. They illuminate a number of obscure New Testament expressions. For example, Matthew 5:43, hate your enemy. As far as we know, however, this expression does not occur in the Old Testament or in Rabbinic Judaism, but the idea is found at Qumran. The people of Qumran had withdrawn into the wilderness to await the end of the age. They're awaiting Jesus. Well, not Jesus. They're awaiting the Messiah to show up and punish everybody who's bad. They were, the Qumran community, the Essenes, they were the sons of light, equipping themselves through intense discipline, rituals of purity, and scriptural study to overcome their enemy, the sons of darkness. These are their own words, not scripture. in their manual of discipline, chapter 1, verse 9 through 11, not the Bible, it reads, to love all the sons of light, each according to his lot in the counsel of God, and to hate all the sons of darkness, each according to his guilt in the vengeance of God. So it's literally taught in that day. Now, it's from this community that is trying to stay separate, but word is probably spread. That's how they're acting anyway.
But it's like the cool, popular thing at the time.
Yeah.
Like, it's seen as like, if you're hardcore, you'd go out there and live with the Essenes.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like a kid today being like, oh, I don't like hunger in Africa, and I don't like these. And you're like, okay, what are you going to do about it? And then they join the Peace Corps, and you don't see them for 12 years, and you're like, that's them taking it serious.
Well, and to me, it's like famous YouTubers. Like, if a famous YouTuber came out with statements of like their values, and you were like, and they started teaching kids them, and you're like, because I mean, if you ask any kid under the age of about 15 right now, what do you want to be? If you could be anything, they're gonna say YouTuber. I want to be.
And then they're gonna say, smash that subscribe button, and you're gonna slap
my kids
them
literally
right in the
when
face.
they finish watching movies or playing video games will go like and subscribe. No one's there. There are no videos. There's no cameras. And I'm like, what's happening right now?
I'm just imagining that at the end of some cinematic masterpiece like Tenet or
Dude,
Asteroid City by Wes Anderson.
I was like, what's happening?
Like and subscribe.
I failed as a father.
Yeah.
So, I'm just imagining if that's like every time they signed off, they're like, hey, we are children of light. We love the light and we hate what is wrong. Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Like that's their sign off.
And like I said, in that book, the Manual of Discipline for the Essenes, not the Bible, it is chapter 1, verse 9 through 11. So it's very soon.
Well, this has been awesome, Ryan, and I love that we get a chance to break this stuff down. And I know you could probably talk all night.
I really could.
And honestly, questions, comments, let Ryan just spew his knowledge all over. And
we need to make another metaphor.
Let him give you all that he has. Hand it over. So leave a comment, send an email, leave a review if you're listening. It always helps. And maybe send this to somebody that you feel like would enjoy it. Maybe like an aunt or an uncle or something.
Send this to somebody you hate. I'm so kidding. If you got sent this, that was a joke. That was not serious. Oh my God.
Well, Ryan, any closing thoughts?
Nope.
You crushed it. Have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you guys later.
See ya.